This is a quick guide on how to properly color your items in Path to Exile 1. Certain colors are connected to specific stats. For example, Energy Shield, Intelligence and blue sockets are connected, Armor, Strength and red sockets are connected, and Evasion, Dexterity and green sockets are connected. If we look at some examples here, we have an Evasion rating base. You can see that it has a Dex requirement, so if you use a few chromatic orbs, it should have a high bias towards green sockets. Here we have a pure armor base that has a strength requirement, so here the bias should be towards red sockets. And here we have a hybrid base with armor and energy shield. We can see that it has a strength and intelligence requirement, so the bias is towards red and blue sockets. The higher the attribute requirement, the more likely it is to roll this connected color. So for example, if you have a pure energy shield base, it's pretty easy to roll blue sockets and pretty hard to roll green and red sockets. So for example, if your build wants a 6-link with a lot of blue sockets, the easiest to achieve this is to use a pure energy shield base or use a hybrid base that also has energy shield in it or intelligence requirement. It's very hard to roll, for example, 5 blue sockets on a pure armor base. Rolling a color on an item that is not connected to the base is what we call off-color. The more off-colors you want on the item, the harder it is to roll and the more expensive it can get with chromatic orbs. There are 3 main ways to color your items. The first one is just using chromatic orbs. The second one is using the crafting bench to force 1, 2 or 3 specific colors on the item. And the third one is to use the Jeweler's Orb method. Using chromatic orbs is good if you, for example, have a 6-link energy shield armor and you want 5 or 6 blue sockets on there. Using the crafting bench color option is good if you only need a couple of off-color. So for example, if you have an energy shield armor base and you need 2 of each color. The Jeweler's method is mainly used if you need 3 or 4 off-colors on a 4-socket item. To decide if method 1 or 2 is more efficient, there's a really cool website tool called the Borichi Calculator. In here you can just put in the requirement the item has, and it automatically calculates what is the most efficient way to craft this. Let's say we want an item with 2 green, 2 red and 2 blue sockets. If we take this base for example, we can say that we want these sockets, and it has a 180 strength requirement. We press calculate. We can see that the most efficient way is to benchcraft 1 green, 1 blue, and you do this until we have our desired colors. This costs 325 chromatic orbs on average. If we now use this base for example, we can see that it has 173 strength and 173 int requirements. And now the average cost is only 27 chromatic orbs by just using the first method of chromatic orb spamming. This shows how big the difference can be by just choosing a different base. Let's use the same bases, but let's say we want 1 red socket and 5 blue sockets. If you use this hybrid base, it only costs 20 chromatic orbs to hit this combination. If we now use the pure strength base, we see that it almost costs 9,000 chromatic orbs to hit this combination. It's very, very unlikely to hit 5 or 6 off-color on an item. Before you start crafting, already keep in mind what color you need on the item, and if you can, buy a base that has an easier time to roll this. Let's say you're an armor-focused build, but you still want this combination. As you can see here, it's very, very unlikely to hit this color combination, so if you can just use a hybrid base. You lose some armor for this, but you save a lot of money in chromatic orbs. For the Jeweler's method, it's important to know that adding sockets or colors at the crafting bench always follows a specific order. It always follows the chain from top left to bottom right. Let's use these blues for example. They are a pure armor base and they have 95% strength requirement. This means a heavy bias towards red sockets. We want 4 blue sockets on this item. It will cost 1.3k chromatic orbs. This will be much cheaper with the Jeweler's method. We learned earlier that adding sockets or colors always follows this specific path. So having 2 sockets will always be the top ones, adding a 3rd socket will add the bottom right one, and adding a 4th socket will add the bottom left one. What we can do now is add 2 blue sockets, which will always add the top 2 sockets, and then go from 2 sockets to 3 sockets to basically re-roll this socket over and over again until it's blue. Each try only costs 4 Jeweler's Orbs. Now that we have the 3rd one, we can just repeat the same thing with 3 and 4 sockets. Now we have 4 blue sockets on a pure strength base that would have cost us 1.3k chromatic orbs. Instead, we spent around 250 Jeweler's Orbs. For corrupted items, there are two main methods, either the Tainted Chromatic Orb or the Crafting Bench. The Crafting Bench for corrupted items works the same as the regular one, it just adds the same value of Vaal Orbs on top of the craft. The Tainted Chromatic Orb works like a normal Chromatic Orb, but it ignores the attribute requirements on an item. This means that every color has the same weighting to get rolled. This should cover all the basics of how to properly color your items. If you have any questions, just ask them in the comments.